21 hours. That is how long the most consequential diplomatic talks of the decade lasted before they collapsed. 21 hours in a lockdown city with thousands of troops on the streets, the world's oil markets holding their breath, and two nuclear-armed adversaries sitting across a table for the very first time. And when it was over, Vice President JD Vance walked to a podium, spoke for exactly 4 minutes, and boarded Air Force Two. No deal, no path forward, and a fragile ceasefire that now hangs by a thread. But here is what the headlines are not telling you. The failure in Islamabad is not just a diplomatic setback. It is the opening chapter of a far more dangerous phase of this conflict, one that involves unlocated sea mines in the world's most critical oil choke point, a ceasefire that neither side is actually honoring, and a nuclear program that American intelligence cannot fully account for. We're going to break all of it down for you today, piece by piece. And by the end of this video, you will understand not just what happened in Islamabad, but what is coming next. If you are new here, this channel delivers the kind of deep military and geopolitical analysis you will not find on cable news. Subscribe right now, hit the like button to help other people find this video, and share it with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening in the Middle East. Let us start with the context, because without it, the Islamabad talks make no sense at all. 6 weeks ago, on February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated air campaign against Iran. The stated objectives were threefold: destroy Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities, degrade its military capabilities, and eliminate its supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. American B-2 bombers and Israeli F-35s struck Fordo, Natanz, and multiple IRGC command centers in a single night. Khamenei was killed. 2 of Iran's primary enrichment facilities were severely damaged, and Iran retaliated immediately. Within 72 hours, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had mined the Strait of Hormuz. 21 confirmed attacks on merchant vessels followed. Major shipping firms suspended all operations through the strait. And overnight, roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil supply simply vanished from global markets. The economic consequences were staggering. Brent crude prices spiked by more than 13% in the first week of trading. On March 19th, Dubai crude reached $166 per barrel, the highest price ever recorded. By late March, California's gas prices had crossed $5 per gallon. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas projected that a prolonged closure could push West Texas Intermediate to $132 per barrel and reduce global GDP growth by 2.9 percentage points in the second quarter of 2026 alone. And here is where it gets truly remarkable. More than 600 vessels became trapped in the Middle East Gulf region, their operators waiting, burning fuel, hemorrhaging money, unable to transit a strait that is only 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Now, as we mentioned, we will come back to the mines in a moment, because that part of the story changes everything. After 6 weeks of airstrikes, economic paralysis, and frantic back-channel diplomacy, a fragile 2-week ceasefire was announced on April 8th. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief Asim Munir had spent weeks positioning their country as the only neutral mediator that both Tehran and Washington could accept. It was a remarkable diplomatic play, and it worked, at least long enough to get both delegations into the same building. On Saturday, April 11th, Vice President JD Vance arrived in Islamabad, accompanied by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, who has become a central figure in every major negotiation this administration has attempted. The Iranian delegation was led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. The talks began Saturday morning, local time. They did not stop. Vance's team spoke with President Trump at least a half-dozen times during those 21 hours. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of U.S. Central Command, were all in continuous contact with the negotiating team. This was not a side conversation. This was the full weight of the American government focused on a single outcome. The discussions covered 4 core areas: the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's nuclear program, war reparations, the lifting of sanctions. And on each of these points, the two sides arrived at the same place: nowhere. And this is the part that changes everything. The single issue that killed the talks was Iran's nuclear program. Not the strait, not sanctions, the bomb. According to Vance, the American position was straightforward. The U.S. required a long-term affirmative commitment from Tehran to permanently abandon any effort to develop nuclear weapons, including the enrichment capabilities that would allow them to produce one quickly. In June 2025, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran held an estimated 972 pounds of uranium enriched to 60%. That level of enrichment is one short technical step from weapons-grade material at 90%. The IAEA has disputed American claims that the strikes on Fordo and Natanz completely destroyed Iran's enrichment capacity. Some of that material and some of that knowledge almost certainly survived. Iran refused to give the commitment Washington demanded. Iranian state media blamed the failure on what it called the excessive demands of the American side. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said there was a gap in viewpoints on 2 or 3 key issues. He also said, and this is significant, that diplomacy never comes to an end. Vance was less diplomatic. He said, and I quote his 4-minute press statement here, "The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that is bad news for Iran much more than it is bad news for the United States." He left Islamabad immediately. Not hours later, immediately. Now we need to talk about the Strait of Hormuz, because this is where the strategic situation becomes genuinely alarming. Even before the Islamabad talks collapsed, the ceasefire was already under enormous strain. Iran has not reopened the strait in any meaningful way. As of April 9th, the CEO of Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, Sultan Al Jaber, stated publicly that the strait is not open. His words were precise: access is being restricted, conditioned, and controlled. Iran is requiring ships to obtain its permission to pass, in some cases demanding fees of $1 million or more per vessel. That is not freedom of navigation, that is coercion. More than 230 loaded oil tankers remained idle inside the Gulf. Trump has been explicit. On Truth Social, he wrote that Iran was doing a very poor job, dishonorable, some would say, of allowing oil through the strait. And he warned that American warships are being loaded with the best ammunition and that new strikes are possible if talks fail. On Saturday, as the Islamabad negotiations were underway, the USS Frank E. Peterson and the USS Michael Murphy became the first American warships to transit the Strait of Hormuz since the start of the war. Their mission was mine clearance. And here is where we get to the most dangerous detail in this entire story. According to reporting by the New York Times, citing U.S. officials, Iran has lost track of multiple mines it laid in the strait during the conflict. The mines were deployed using small boats in an operation that lacked systematic documentation. Some devices may have drifted from their original positions due to ocean currents. Iran cannot find all of them. Its foreign minister essentially acknowledged this, saying the reopening of the strait would take place, quote, taking into account technical constraints. Sea mine clearance is one of the most complex operations in all of naval warfare. Even the United States, with its state-of-the-art mine-hunting vessels, does not have the resources to clear a turbulent, commercially vital waterway quickly. Iran's naval infrastructure was further degraded by American strikes. This is not a problem that resolves itself in days or weeks. And in the meantime, 20% of the world's oil supply remains strangled. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now. This situation is developing faster than almost anyone anticipated, and we are covering every major development as it breaks. So where does this leave us? Let us assess the strategic picture with clarity. The ceasefire technically remains in place, but it is a ceasefire in name only. Iran continues to restrict the strait. Israel continued strikes in southern Lebanon during the talks, killing more than 300 people in Beirut, which caused Iran to shut the strait again in retaliation on April 9th. Hezbollah and Israel are trading fire. Kuwait was struck by drones. The regional conflict is not cooling. It is simmering at a temperature just below renewed escalation. Tehran faces a set of choices that all look bad. Accept American terms, which require permanently surrendering the nuclear program that the Islamic Republic has spent decades and billions of dollars building, a program that is the regime's ultimate insurance policy. Or refuse and face a U.S. military that President Trump has publicly stated is loaded and ready. Iranian state media says there are currently no plans for another round of negotiations. But Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson says diplomacy never ends. Washington faces its own dilemma. Trump entered this conflict with three stated objectives: destroy Iran's nuclear capability, degrade its military, and force regime change. None of those three objectives has been fully achieved. Vance left a final offer on the table. The question now is what happens if Tehran simply does not respond? The Dallas Fed's most current modeling suggests that every additional month of Hormuz disruption at current levels costs the global economy between 0.5 and 1.5 percentage points of GDP growth. For emerging markets that import the majority of their energy, the consequences are not abstract. They are food prices, they are electricity costs, they are political instability. China receives roughly 1/3 of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Japan and South Korea are nearly entirely dependent on it. India is absorbing the shock at scale. And the International Energy Agency's emergency release of 400 million barrels from strategic reserves represents approximately 4 days of global consumption. That is not a solution. That is a delay. And this is the part that changes everything for the next phase of this conflict. Iran's leverage is not its military. Its air defenses have been largely destroyed. Its navy has been degraded. Its supreme leader is dead. Iran's leverage is the mines. As long as those mines are in the water, or as long as Tehran can credibly threaten to put more in the water, the world's most important oil shipping lane remains hostage. And Iran knows it. That asymmetric reality is precisely why 21 hours of negotiations produced nothing. There are now effectively three possible paths forward. The first path is a renewed deal. Iran accepts something close to the American framework, provides enough of a commitment on the nuclear question to allow both sides to claim a partial win. The strait reopens, and the ceasefire holds. This is the path Vance's final offer was designed to enable. It is possible. It requires the Iranian leadership to make a calculation that the cost of continued confrontation exceeds the cost of strategic concession. The second path is renewed military action. Trump has been explicit and consistent. If the talks fail, American warships are ready. A second wave of strikes would likely target any remaining nuclear infrastructure, remaining IRGC naval assets, and potentially command structures. The risk of escalation into a broader regional war, drawing in Hezbollah, Houthi forces in Yemen, and potentially Iraqi militias, would be severe. But Trump has shown no reluctance to absorb that risk. The third path is the most dangerous and the least discussed. Stalemate, a frozen conflict. The ceasefire, technically intact, but substantively meaningless. The strait, partially open, partially mined, partially coerced. Oil prices locked in a range that slowly bleeds the global economy. Neither side willing to take the decisive step that forces a resolution. History is full of frozen conflicts. Most of them end badly. What Vance's departure from Islamabad confirmed is that the United States and Iran are not, at this moment, in the same negotiating universe. Washington wants permanent denuclearization. Tehran wants recognition, sanctions relief, and reconstruction guarantees, with nuclear ambiguity preserved. Those two positions are not adjacent. They are not close. Bridging them would require one side to fundamentally change what it is asking for. Pakistan's foreign minister said after the talks that Islamabad has been and will continue to be a mediator. That door is not fully closed. But as of this hour, Vice President Vance is on Air Force Two, heading back to Washington, and the Strait of Hormuz remains, to use the UAE oil chief's precise and accurate word, coerced. The world is watching, the tankers are waiting, and the mines are still in the water. Subscribe to this channel right now if you want to stay ahead of this story. Hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find this analysis. And share this video with someone who needs to understand what is really happening. We are going to keep tracking every development in this conflict as it unfolds. Do not miss what comes next.